For years, we've all been told the plastic crisis is out there, in our oceans, in our landfills. We've seen the images. But what if the biggest threat isn't out there at all? What if it's already inside us, in the one place we'd always assumed was completely safe? Yeah, it's a terrifying thought, isn't it? But look, science is kind of forcing us to confront it. We've already found microplastics in our blood, in our lungs, even in placentas. So you have to ask the next deeply unsettling question. Have they managed to breach that final frontier and actually get into our brains? And the answer, according to a frankly shocking new study in the journal Nature Medicine, is a definitive yes. For the very first time, researchers have confirmed that micro and nanoplastics are not just present, they are accumulating in human brain tissue. This isn't speculation anymore, folks. This is hard evidence.
Okay, so let's get right into it. What does this discovery actually mean in real terms? Just how much plastic are we really talking about here? Because the scale of what the researchers found is, well, it's genuinely shocking.
All right, check this out. This is where the scale of the problem just becomes crystal clear. Scientists measured plastic concentrations in key organs. In the liver and kidney, they found around 400 micrograms of plastic per gram of tissue. But in the brain, the median was nearly 5,000. That is more than 10 times higher than in the other major organs they looked at. Just wow.
So what is all this plastic anyway? Well, it turns out one specific type is the overwhelming offender, polyethylene. You know this stuff. It's what makes our plastic bags, food containers, and bottles. And it accounted for a staggering 75% of all the plastic found in the brain tissue. It seems this incredibly common polymer is also incredibly good at, well, getting into our heads. This brings up a huge question, right? How on earth do you find something so minuscule hidden deep inside complex human tissue? It took some seriously advanced scientific detective work to pull this off. The key tool they used is called, get ready, pyrolysis gas chromatography mass spectrometry. Yeah, I know, it's a mouthful. Let's just call it PyGC/MS. But the concept is actually pretty straightforward. You essentially take a sample, you blast it with heat until it breaks down into a gas, and then you analyze that gas to identify the unique chemical fingerprints of different polymers. It's kind of like a forensic analysis, but for plastics. The process itself is just fascinating. First, they got post-mortem tissue samples. Then they used a chemical to basically dissolve all the biological material, the cells, the fats, the proteins, all of it, leaving behind only the solids that wouldn't break down. They spun that mixture down into a tiny little pellet. And yep, you guessed it. That pellet is where they found the plastic. But here's the thing. The researchers didn't just find plastic and call it a day. They found a trend. By looking at tissue samples that had been collected over several decades, they were able to ask a critical question. Is this problem actually getting worse? And by analyzing that brain tissue going back decades, they uncovered a really clear and pretty disturbing trend. The older samples from the late 90s and early 2000s had lower plastic concentrations. But as they moved closer and closer to the present day, the amount of plastic found in the brain tissue just kept going up and up. And that increase seems to be accelerating. In 2016, the median plastic concentration was about 3,300 micrograms per gram. Just 8 years later, in 2024, that number jumped to over 4,900. That's an increase of nearly 50% in less than a decade. That is a massive leap. And here's the real kicker. When they ran all the numbers, factors like a person's age, their sex, or their race, none of them correlated with the amount of plastic in their brain. The one single variable that stood out as significant was the year of death. This strongly suggests that what we're seeing is a direct reflection of our environment. As plastic pollution has exponentially increased in the world, so has its presence inside our bodies. Okay, now we have to approach this next part of the study with a lot of care, because it's where they uncovered something deeply concerning, a potential link between these plastics and neurological disease. The research team also analyzed brain samples from people who had been diagnosed with dementia, and the result they found, it's just staggering. The median plastic concentration they found was over 26,000 micrograms per gram. 26,000. So let's put that number in perspective. Remember the 4,900 number from the 2024 non-dementia brains? This is more than 5 times higher. It's a concentration far, far greater than anything they found in any of the normal brain samples from any time period. But And the scientists are extremely clear about this, so we have to be too. This is an association. It is not a smoking gun. They explicitly state, and I'm quoting here, no causality is assumed from these findings. It could be that dementia damages the blood-brain barrier, which then simply lets more plastic in. So we have a correlation, but we absolutely do not have a cause. At least, not yet.
So what does this all mean? To even begin to understand the potential impact here, we kind of need to know what these invaders actually are. What do they look like inside the brain? Using powerful electron microscopes, the researchers could actually see the particles. They describe them as innumerable shard or flake-like fragments, and they are unbelievably small. Most are what we call nanoplastics, less than 200 nanometers long. For scale, a single human hair is about 80,000 nanometers wide. And in the dementia cases, these tiny shards were seen clustering right around the brain's immune cells and along the walls of blood vessels. So, as we wrap up, it is so crucial to remember that final point. The data is incredibly powerful, but it is associative. It does not yet prove that these particles are causing health problems. And that leads directly to the researchers' own conclusion. This isn't the end of the story, it's a massive call to action. In their own words, these findings compel a much larger effort to figure out what role, if any, these plastics are playing. This study isn't an answer. It's a massive, urgent question. So we're left with this really unsettling new reality. The materials we designed to be indestructible, the plastics that define so much of our modern world, are not just polluting our planet, they are breaching our body's last lines of defense and becoming a physical part of our biology. The evidence is now in our brains, and the most urgent question of all remains to be answered. What will the consequences be?